I'll come up there just to get it started. Okay.
Watching there. Sorry.
Oh,
I'm here.
This is the test. Is it on? Yes, it
Claudette
is.
said she needs two, but I.
Good. Is this on? I just don't have a loud enough voice. Is that? Good evening. I'm Mayor Trent Davis, and you know our city commission commissioner Longbine, Ryan, Lankowitz, and Hoppick, and a lot of community leaders who you will meet soon. I'm actually pleasantly surprised by not surprised, I'm gratified by the turnout here. My role is very short, and that is to introduce our moderator. Having a moderator allows us as commissioners to sit with blank sheets of paper and take notes and listen. That's our job, to leave here smarter. And we're hoping this will be a positive, uplifting session. Our moderator is well equipped for the role. Attorney Ann Zimmerman is a professional mediator, so she's handled folks tougher than you all, so don't try her. And she's also president of the school board, so you know she's well tested. I'm going to turn this over to Ann and go take a seat.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Yes, my name is Ann Zimmerman. I'm a professional mediator in Salina. This is a community forum hosted by the city of Salina to better understand the issue of homelessness in our community. This is a chance for all of us, including the members of the city commission, to learn about people around us who are living without homes. Most of us, I'm looking around here, most of us have never been homeless. And I would venture to say that not many of us have actually known people who have been homeless, or at least realized that they were homeless when we met them. We see people in our town who appear to be living on the street who look like they are homeless, whatever homeless might look like. And we are concerned. When the weather drops like it's forecast to do in the next week, to a low of about 2 degrees by this time next week, we wonder how a person living on the street can even survive. There are people in Salina who do know a lot about homelessness and the people who are affected by it. We have brought many of them together tonight, and we hope to learn from them. Most of the first hour of this presentation will be a chance to hear from them. The rest of this 2-hour event will be a chance to ask them questions. As printed in our agenda, when we get to the questions portion of the program, there are some basic rules of civility we will adhere to. I will call on raised hands to allow for questions. I think we have microphones to talk into, correct? Yes, on both sides of the audience. So if you have a question, please prepare yourself to get to the microphone. We are streaming this, and if you're just speaking from your seat, the people at home will not be able to hear your question. So we want your question to be heard as well as we want the answer to be heard. We ask that you do not post any signs here at the forum. We ask you to remain quiet if you are not the one who has been called on to ask a question. That includes no clapping, cheering, audible noises. And we ask that there be no disrespect against any questioner or any panel member or any public official who's here. And beginning now, please silence your cell phone if you haven't done it already. I'll give you a minute to find that. I can't hear you, sorry. Are there any additional agenda copies? I think they made 50 copies, so they may not have made enough. I can give you the overview. I've just kind of given you the overview. There's not too much more to it than that. We have a few leftover copies here.
Trying to figure out what's changed.
I am going to introduce the panel to my left. Starts with Cody Sparks. He is the clinical director of Central Kansas Mental Health Center. Then is Shane Hudson, the president and CEO of CKF Addiction Treatment. After that is Claudette Humphrey. She is the director of stabilization and outreach services for Catholic Charities of Northern Kansas. Next is Chad Young. He's the executive director of both Salina Rescue Mission and Salina Grace. Next is Daryl Burgoon. He is the executive director of Ashby House. And finally, we have Chief Sean Morton. He's the interim police chief of the Salina Police Department. So the next thing on the agenda is a presentation by Chad Young. He's going to give us an overview of the current Salina homeless situation.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're thankful that you can be out here with us tonight. As we begin to talk about homelessness, you know, we have this image up on the screen of all these tents lined up on the street. And I tell you, if homelessness looked that neat and orderly as it does on the screen right there, most of us probably wouldn't have the problems that we have with it. However, oftentimes this is what we end up seeing, right? And this is what disturbs us. And to be quite frank, homelessness gets pretty ugly at times and affects our community in ways that we don't want it to. It's disturbing. But here's what I want you to understand, or would like to help you to understand tonight, is that behind all of this mess that we see, there's a person behind it. Someone who's going through something that he doesn't know or she doesn't know how to get herself out of. There's issues that are arising that need to be addressed. As we begin looking at homelessness, we need to start understanding what the underlying causes are that create homelessness to begin with. It's a mental health crisis in our nation. Unfortunately, there was a study recently put out that said Kansas ranked 51st out of 50 states. I don't know how you ranked 51st out of 50 states, but as far as lack of access to mental health care. We have an addictions problem. When was the last time you fought the war on drugs? Or just said no? Or dared? We're giving ground to drugs and alcohol in our culture. And it's becoming more and more prevalent. And the drugs that are in our culture today are not the same as they were 40, 50 years ago. There's all kinds of dangerous chemicals floating around now that will kill a person the first time they use it, and even in very small doses. There's a lack of healthy, affordable housing. And it's important to understand it's not just affordable housing, it's healthy, affordable housing. Oftentimes, we've seen men come through the rescue mission. They get a job, they save money, they do the things they're supposed to do. They move into an apartment, a low-income area that's the best that they can do to afford. But however, the environment that they move into is not a healthy environment. And as they become surrounded by the same issues that caused them to become homeless the first time, it's easy to slip right back into that same old behavior and begin another cycle of homelessness. It's trauma, and trauma can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, whether it's the loss of a loved one, a traumatic event someone goes through. Not everybody has the resources to deal with trauma that some people have. There's physical health issues, poverty, and lack of life skills. And this is just the beginning of the list. And one thing I'd like to help us to understand is it's not any one of these things that's doing it. I can't remember the last time we talked to somebody whose issue was just mental health, or their issue was just addiction, or their issue was just poverty. Oftentimes it's 2, 3, 4, 5. It's sometimes the whole list of items that are on there that they're trying to overcome to the best of their ability. Until we can start getting a better handle as a community on these issues that create homelessness, we're going to continue to see it across our nation. I'd also like to help us understand a little bit about homelessness is this. Homelessness is similar to stages of development that we all go through. It starts somewhere. It doesn't start with being homeless. It starts with being at risk of becoming homeless. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of this. Depending on which study you look at, anywhere from 9.6% to 11% of our population in Salina County live below the poverty line. That is anywhere from 5,200 to 5,900 folks in our community that's one paycheck away from some devastating event happening for them losing their houses. We need services in our community that helps those who are in their homes stay in their homes. Once someone crosses that line and becomes homeless the first time, that's where we get to transitional homelessness. That's somebody who goes through a life transition or an event and they become homeless for the first time in their life. It wasn't something they planned on. It wasn't something they were working towards. It's something that all of their life situations and circumstances coming together, they were ill-equipped to deal with. And now they've become homeless. As we begin working with this population, this is the population that we have the greatest chances of success with. They come in, we're able to help them get back on track, address core issues that cause the homelessness, and then help them to get back on their feet. But what happens is if they move into an unhealthy living environment, or they don't get the help for the core issues that created the homelessness to begin with, then they can move back into an apartment until they go through the cycle all over again. And so that's what that episodic homelessness is, where now we're starting to see cycles of homelessness develop in someone's life. So they go through a cycle, they fall apart, they become homeless, they get help, They move back into an apartment, they do well for a period of time, then they fall apart again. And they go through the cycle again, and they go through it a second time, and sometimes a third time, and sometimes a fourth time, and so on, until we get to chronic homelessness. A chronically homeless person is someone who is homeless for a year or more than 4 times that they experience homelessness. And so that's when someone becomes chronically homeless. Now, I'll tell you, as people, we're pretty resilient. And that can work both for us and against us. We're highly adaptive. We're meant to survive. And sometimes we can adapt and start living and surviving at some of the lowest common denominators. We can even get comfortable with it. And that's what we see in chronic homelessness. And it becomes very, very difficult at that point in time to be able to help people come out of homelessness when they get to this stage. Now, one last thing I'd like to share before we move on is this. Between transitional homelessness and episodic homelessness, that is about 60 to 80%, depending on where geographically you're living, of your homeless population. That chronic homeless population is anywhere from 20 to 35, even as high as 40% if you're on the West Coast especially. And so understanding that the chronically homeless that we see in our community is a small portion of those who are actually wrestling with homelessness in our community. This last year in 2021, between the Salina Rescue Mission, Salina Grace, Ashby House, and DVAC, we provided shelter collectively for over 900 different individuals in our community. That doesn't count the ones who went unsheltered. That doesn't count the ones that were couch surfing. That doesn't count the ones that were sleeping in their cars or sleeping in the streets. We estimate, and we have to estimate, the 900 plus we know because we're able to count them as we serve them every night. But when it comes to counting how many homeless people we have that are actually in our community, that's a very difficult number to actually pinpoint. But our best estimates is we'll probably have somewhere around 2,000 people experience homelessness in some form in the Salina area each year. And that's what we're up against. So what are we doing about it? We have agencies that are working to provide shelters and programs, and you'll hear a little bit more about those programs here in just a moment. The Rescue Mission, DVAC, Ashby House, and Salina Grace. We all have some sheltering programs, Shelter Plus programs that we provide. In addition to that, we have homeless prevention and supportive services from Catholic Charities, the Salvation Army, the Food Bank, Salina Shares, and the Salina Grace Community Resource Center. Additionally, we have agencies providing addiction treatment and mental health services and physical health services, such as CKF Addiction Treatment, Central Kansas Mental Health, Salina Family Health Care, and Salina Regional Health Center. I'll end by saying this. The topic of homelessness is big enough to get us all here in this room tonight. It's concerning to us. I'm glad it's concerning to us. When it stops being concerning to us, then I will be really concerned about the state of our souls. It takes all of us pulling together putting our piece of expertise that we each have collectively together to start addressing these problems. And that's what we want to talk about here tonight. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Ann.
Thank you, Chad. Let's give him a hand. He put some work into that presentation. Now I'm going to go down the line of our panel and give each of these individuals just 3 minutes or so of summary of how their agency or organization deals with homelessness in Salina. So let's start with you, Cody, and you can do whichever you want. Maybe stay there. You've got a microphone. Thank you.
All right, I'm Cody Sparks, the clinical director at Central Kansas, and we usually interact with the homeless when we get them referred from either the rescue mission or Ashby House or even law enforcement when they've come across somebody that's needing some help. And from there, we try and utilize whatever programs are available, depending on whatever the person's needs are, whether it's housing or getting in to try and get on disability or whatever it is. And then we'll also try and connect them with the other services of some of the folks you'll hear about here. That's pretty much what we do.
Thank you. Shane.
Hello, my name is Shane Hudson. I'm the CEO of CCAF Addiction Treatment. CCAF's been in Salina since 1967. I have not been there that long, but I've been at CCAF for 12 years and been in Salina for 9 years and really appreciate this community and all the resources available. I think it's fantastic how all these agencies work together to help people in various phases of life and trying to improve themselves. Just as a note, when you think of homelessness and this word addiction comes up, we know that plenty of people across the country have addiction. 1 in 10 actually ages 12 and older, and only 10% of those people are showing up in treatment settings like ours. And while CCAF's seen an increase in patients attending services over the last 4 years, we were about 2,000 patients a few years ago and serving 2,700. Sorry, I keep making this mic bounce. 2,700 by the end of this year. We know there are far more people out there in society, your neighbors, friends, family, loved ones, people, friends who are people, friends of those you know, are struggling with addiction, and it's a chronic condition that people are going to be managing their whole lives and need to get healthcare resources and need to manage that condition, such as chronic disease management, as you see with other chronic conditions. So while we do see patients who have housing insecurity, may experience homelessness, of course, for those few that are attending treatment out of the many who need it, when housing is a barrier, that's a huge issue. Our attendance rates for our house program, we've been working with Ashby for the last few years, our Bridge House program, women and women with children can stay there for 90 days and get housing for free while they're attending their outpatient services. The attendance rate when we solve that housing barrier is 96%. Our telehealth services, our attendance rate 75%, and our in-person services, the attendance rate 65%. So you can just see from that example of having housing included what a huge issue that is, and maybe just for someone who is in some of these other phases of homelessness versus actually not having a home ever, day in and day out, month after month. But it's a huge issue that we work to solve. So our detoxification, residential treatment services here in town, individuals coming to those programs, discharging if they don't have housing, how do you stabilize their condition? How do you get them the next level of clinical care to help them stabilize their condition if housing is an issue for them? And if they're in one place and then another place and then another place, and you have a hard time even finding people to connect with. So just to give you an example of what we see as we work with patients, it varies across the board, but by and large, people who have housing security are more likely to show up and get this healthcare service from us.
Thank you. Those of you without windscreens on your mic, you might try talking with it down by your chin. It'd be less likely to crash. Okay, Claudette Humphrey from Catholic Charities.
Hello, I'm Claudette Humphrey. I'm the Director of Stabilization and Outreach Services with Catholic Charities. I have been there for 10 years now, and for 6 years prior to that, I worked at DVAC. So I've worked extensively in the area of homelessness and poverty for most of my career, actually. So with Catholic Charities, what we have our normal emergency assistance, and that can help a household with as much as $200 toward their rent or a utility bill. Sometimes that's very needed because these individuals, especially those that might be on some sort of housing program or people who have DCF involved in their life with their children, having their utilities disconnected and things like that could then kind of spiral into a lot more of a more dire situation with regard to their families. But the main program that I have when I deal the most with people who are at risk or literally homeless is our housing assistance program, where we're funded through a grant called the Emergency Solutions Grant. That grant allows me to have a program that it's called homeless prevention. And for that, it's individuals who are at risk of homelessness. So maybe they fell behind on rent, or they've lost their job, or they've gotten sick and are unable to get paid for some reason. But for whatever reason, they're at risk of potentially becoming homeless. So we're able to stave that off by helping them to pay their rent for anywhere from 3 to 6 months, while we also do a lot of intensive case management and working on budgeting and all of those other pieces. And then it's kind of a more holistic approach. We work a lot with their case managers if they're involved in other services. All of our programming for this particular program, a person has to be on legal supervision. So all of my clients are either on probation, corrections, or parole as well. And then we also, in that same target population, have our rapid rehousing program, and that is for people who are literally homeless. Again, they have to be on probation, corrections, or parole, but these are individuals who are living in motels, who are living on the street, who are living in their cars, who are literally homeless and without a place to stay night after night. So that's kind of the piece that we play. And again, with all of our clients, we offer intensive case management. So I'm seeing them and talking with them and meeting with them every week. And if they're in drug court or on some other program, then we try to make sure we're staying connected with those other service agencies to make sure that we're kind of all together trying to help them rebuild a foundation.
Thank you. Chad, you gave us a lot of overview, but you could give us some details too about Salina Rescue Mission and Salina Grace.
Sure. The Salina Rescue Mission has been providing services to our homeless community for 41 years. We have a feeding program where this past year we served over 56,000 meals, and that's to anyone in our community who's in need of a meal can come to the mission for either lunch or dinner 7 days a week. In our shelter, we provided 23,840 safe nights of shelter this past year. That's an average of 65 men every night of the year. We have an employment program where we work with our shelter guests to help them to get a job. We had 151 men get full-time jobs this past year, and 110 were able to save up money and move out of the mission into their own apartment within this past year. We also have a medical mental health program for those who can't work due to medical or mental health issues. And our focus is partnering with our friends at Central Kansas Mental Health, Salina Family Health Care, and other healthcare agents in the community to make sure that they receive all their health care needs. Last year, we paid for 97 doctor's visits to make sure men got the health care they needed, and we paid for nearly 300 prescriptions of medications to make sure they got the health care needed. In addition to that, we have a New Life program, which is a long-term Christian-focused recovery program that can take anywhere from 4 to 6 months on the early end if people just want to focus in on their addictions and major life change issues, all the way up to 18 months for those who want to continue on in our discipleship program. Salina Grace started 6 years ago as we began looking at gaps in our community. One of the things that I personally struggled with in my life was alcohol and drug addiction. And I know that I tried many times to get myself on the right track before I actually did it. I relapsed many times. And at the Salina Rescue Mission, a person has to stay sober to receive our services. And oftentimes we have to ask somebody to leave because they're intoxicated. I hate asking someone to leave. I hate it more in the wintertime. So we opened up the Salina Grace shelter at Grand Avenue United Methodist Church to be a low barrier shelter for the winter only. And at Grand Avenue, we're able to provide an additional safe, warm night of sleep for those who are, like I once was, still struggling in their addiction and still wanting help. And the goal there is to help them move towards getting the help they need through encouraging them to go to CKF Addiction Treatment Center, encouraging those with mental health services to get engaged with Central Kansas Mental Health, and so on. As we've worked with this group, one of the things that we've noticed is that they need more help to get the help. I know that sounds kind of silly, right? But here's the issue. If you're living in crisis and you're not sure who you trust and you don't know which direction you're going, it can be a big, scary world out there to try to take on. And so we opened up the Community Resource Center January of this year. And we provide 2 case management people who are here ready to build relationships with our homeless neighbors, get to know them personally, build a relationship built on trust, and then start helping them move towards getting the help they need, which is oftentimes help from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different agencies. And so helping to coordinate those services and care and give them support on a daily basis. We've been blown away by what we've learned this year. We expected maybe we'd get 20 to 30 people a day coming through these doors. We've been having 50 to 60 a day come through our doors. We've served over 550 different individuals. But what's been the most dramatic is we've seen some of our longtime chronically homeless people in our community build trust relationships with Chris and Amanda and start to get the help that they've been fighting against for so long. This program at Salina Grace would not be possible without the support of the City of Salina and Saline County. They're both stepping up to the plate and lending their support to this project, and I thought that was important to share. So that's all I have for right now, Ann. Thank you.
Thank you. Next in line is Daryl Burgoon with Ashby House.
Hello, everyone. I became the director of Ashby House back in June, so it's been the last 6 months. Prior to that, I was in the education realm, actually 34 years. Almost all those years I taught or was an administrator in poverty, so I kind of have a background working with at-risk families and particularly children. 20 years taught in title schools, and 14 I was a principal. The last 10 years I was the elementary principal at Schilling, about 84% free reduced lunches. So I have a passion for at-risk families and particularly children. And personally, I grew up in a single-parent home. It was situational poverty. My father died of cancer when I was young. I was the oldest of 3. Had to kind of help my mother along and had to get a job when I was 14 to help work to help raise my 2 younger siblings. And so I know what poverty is like, and I know what it took to get out of poverty. I actually was the first person to graduate in my family from Emporia State University, and actually got my master's from Emporia State as well. Go Hornets! And so I definitely have a passion for at-risk families. Just a little bit about Ashby House. We actually are celebrating our 30th year this year being in existence, and we couldn't do that without loving, caring people like yourselves that give us financial support. There's three main programs that we have at Ashby House. One is our shelter, and we provide mainly just shelter for women and children. And when we take them in, we first meet their basic needs, try to get them clothing and food, and then we do offer life skills classes for all of our clients. We offer financial literacy classes where they can learn how to save money and open bank accounts. We work with some different banks here in town to provide those services. We do reach out to businesses and help get our clients employment. That's very important as well. Shane talked a little bit about our partnership with CKF, where we offer on-site treatment, and talked about the percentages of how they finish those programs because it's right there on site. And for those patients, they have the same access to the life skills classes that we have, the financial literacy classes that we have. We do try to get them employment as well, because our mission at Ashby House is to get people out of poverty, off of the street, and back into to being a productive citizen in the community. And you can't do that unless they're getting jobs and they're learning how to save money. The third part of our program is when any of our clients or patients finish their program, we have supportive community housing or transitional housing where they can stay at a small rent fee on their own and rent from us and try to get back to where we can finally get them into permanent housing. And our goal is always to try to get all of our clients, patients back into permanent housing. So, and we do have one other part of our programs called the Free Store, and it is exactly what it's called. You can go there and pick up items for free, and we average about 35 to 45 people daily that take advantage of that program. So.
Thank you, Daryl. Last on our panel is Chief Sean Morton. He is the interim chief of police for the Salina Police Department.
Good evening. As mentioned, my name is Sean Morton. I'm the interim police chief here in Salina. Been with the Salina Police Department now, just turned 31 years. If you look at the back of the room and you notice that I have 4 officers here, you may think that I maybe thought I needed some extra backup here tonight. But in fact, the purpose is these folks, I want them to hear directly from the people in this room with regards to the concerns relative to homelessness, and hopes that they take it back to their respective divisions and talk about what they've heard and come up with ideas and solutions on what the police department can do to help with this. I'll introduce them briefly. Captain Gary Hannes, who's in charge of detectives. Captain Paul Forrester, who's in charge of support, which includes SROs and emergency communications. Lieutenant Mike Miller, who's a patrol lieutenant, and Officer Michaela Todd, who's one of the second shift officers. So I got a variety of people that I asked to come and attend and listen to what you folks had to say. I think everybody pretty much knows the responsibility of law enforcement is to be there to protect and serve and to enforce local and state laws. But we also, our job is to concentrate on people's actions and unlawful actions with evidence and not on appearances. Over the last several years, the police department has done several different things to try to help with the homelessness situation here in Salina. Some of those include, of course, we work very closely with the folks that are sitting here at this table. We work with local businesses and property owners to address concerns that they have with regards to trespassing, vandalism, camping on their property, giving suggestions on how they may secure their property or signage that they may need. In July of 2021, we started a program here where our officers that are in patrol each shift tries to assign 2 people to do foot patrol downtown, whether call load, staffing permitting. But yeah, that's each shift during the day, evening, night. We try to do that. They walk downtown to, keep an eye on things, check doors, talk with folks that they have may run into. And in September of 2021 is when the Salina's camping ordinance was finally went into effect. Shortly after it came into effect, our instruction to the officers at that time is that we were essentially in an education mode. This was a brand new ordinance, and we wanted them to communicate with the folks that we found on, they're camping on public property, of what the new ordinance was, and that, potentially in the future, they could be facing notice to appears, arrests, fines, jail. So since that time in 2022, our approach with that respect has changed, and we're in an enforcement mode now. And I can tell you that so far this year, officers have issued 23 notice to appears or made arrests with regards to the public camping. I know through talking with Chad that some of those have led to some folks going to the shelter after we've had that particular contact with them to not be on the street. So that's a good thing. Over the summer, this past summer, I did a walking tour with Salina downtown and their staff to just take a look at things downtown to see what in fact the issues were from their perspective and what they were hearing, and to also see what I could identify as issues. I can tell you that we have talked to some businesses, or at least one business downtown, with regards to concern with regards to a spot on their property that was used for sleeping and storage of property. We worked with that property owner so it could be secured, so that's no longer happening there. So we also started tracking calls that we take with regards to homelessness issues. We just started doing that in August of this year, and so far we've tracked 100 and some particular calls that we've dealt with that involves homelessness. Currently, the police department's working with the city prosecutor to come up with a ordinance with regards to consumption, or actually possession of alcohol on public property in certain places. You may or may not know that the way the ordinance is currently written, that we actually have to observe the consumption of the alcohol before we can take enforcement action. So that means we have to be incognito to some extent to be able to observe that. In most cases, they're not going to do it while we're standing right there. So there have been some occasions over this past summer where we've had officers, when staffing's allowed, to be in vehicles that are unmarked and have observed one particular area downtown in regards to 7th and Walnut, and we have issued some tickets with regards to that. I want you to know that, we're not only trying to address the concerns with regards to homelessness, but we also, with very short staffing, are trying to address the other concerns that other citizens in the community have. Most every shift with regards to patrol and communications work with minimums every day due to staffing issues. But I'll commend all of them for doing a great job and for taking care of each other and taking care of the public. So thank you.
Thank you. With all that information now, we're going to have a presentation by Assistant City Manager Sean Hennessy about the legal constraints of the city in working on this issue.
Could you pull up the other one? Well, I'll just start off and introduce myself. So I am fairly new to the Salina area. I just started here in January as an assistant city manager. I did grow up in Wichita and went through my undergraduate there, so it was nice to come back here after spending some time on the West Coast. And I'll talk about some of the differences that we have here on the legal side of it in regards to the homelessness issue. Law enforcement and the court system does play an important role in homelessness, but it is limited. And I think that sometimes people have a misperception about some of the actions that can be taken. The actions are actually limited in a number of ways, and I wanted to kind of go over them.
John, hold it close to your mouth.
Sure.
We're having some trouble hearing
Is
us.
that better? Okay. And so there are limitations on what the actions that can be taken. Before I get into this, I want to also assure you that I'm not going to use any Latin terms or really dry legalese. And I'm going to try to make this as much of a broad overview of the issues directly affecting homelessness in Salina. I do want to thank the members of the forum for coming here, and all the other organizations who are obviously limited in how many people could be here on the forum. So we've got a number of other providers here in the Salina area. So they all do a very valuable service for the city and for the community. So in regards to some of the legal issues and oftentimes constraints, Chief Morton mentioned the camping ordinance. We do have a camping ordinance here in effect, as Chief Morton talked about, and there is enforcement of it. We're very well off here as opposed to, for example, in Washington State, where I was a county manager before, because we're in the Ninth Circuit, and the Ninth Circuit is well known for taking some actions which are very difficult for local governments to enforce. So they propagated the first rule in the case of City of Boise versus Martin, whereby you could not have an anti-camping ordinance unless there was beds available. The City of Salina ordinance follows that standard, even though technically we're in the 10th Circuit, but it is a good idea for us to follow it. The biggest difference is here in the City of Salina, we have the capacity, because of all these providers that are here, to at least provide these services. There has not been beds available in Clark County, which is right next to Portland, where I was county manager for over 15 years to handle the homelessness. So it doesn't matter if you have an anti-camping ordinance, you can't enforce it. Because the only way you can do it under the legal system to cite somebody for camping is if there is beds available for them to use. Homelessness is a problem everywhere, but it is in different degrees. And I can tell you from personal experience, it is much, much worse, much as Chad alluded to on the West Coast, particularly in regards to chronic homelessness. The other Kansas cities have adopted an anti-camping ordinance. This includes both Wichita and Lawrence, and they also have adopted that same standard that there needs to be adequate housing before enforcing it. I suspect strongly, based upon my experiences in Wichita, that they probably are not able to enforce it because of the unavailability of housing, but I don't know that for certain. I know that used to be a very strong struggle in the city of Wichita. The anti-camping ordinances really only apply to public property, not private property. You still have the ability as a private property owner to charge somebody with trespass. So these anti-camping ordinances are in regards to public property. Also, and we'll talk more about this when we get to the specific trespassing. One of the issues that you often face is who can be charged with trespassing? Who can ask the law enforcement to charge them with trespassing? Obviously, if you're the owner of the property, you can. If you're a business, a commercial business and operation, and you control that entire area, you can. The difficulty comes into sometimes when you have apartment complexes. If anybody breaks into your apartment, that could be a burglary, or certainly it would be a trespass if it's within your area. But you can't allow individuals within the apartments to request anyone be charged with trespassing if they're just in the commons area there. So in those cases, there needs to be specific authorization before a trespassing charge can come into effect. So that's another limitation on that. We don't see this problem here in Salina, but one of the things that we saw was there were some absentee landowners that would basically open up their property to large encampments. And when I say large encampments, I mean thousands of people. I've been back in Kansas for a year, and I'm still a little shocked when I go to an underpass and there isn't 50 people living under there. That is every single overpass in Portland when you're there. So we still have problems here, don't get me wrong, in regards to homelessness, but the scale is just massive there on the West Coast. And we're also very lucky to have these individuals and those other organizations who are providing these services. Alcohol restrictions. Growing up in Kansas, I knew that there was no open containers allowed in cars, motor vehicles, period. Kind of freaked me out the first time I went to Missouri and found out that you could drive down I-70 after you got out of Independence and have an open container. Anheuser-Busch has a little bit of influence in Missouri.
So, John, keep it close.
Sure.
Yeah.
If I put some tasty on it.
Yeah.
There is currently no prohibition in our city parks for the consumption of alcoholic beverages. I've talked with the parks director. The difficulty in this comes into if you prohibit all alcoholic beverages in parks, then nobody can, because the law has to be applied equally across the board. So you could be charged if you brought a six-pack for your family reunion. So that, again, is one of the other complications that we have, is making sure that any laws that are passed are applied broadly and equally across the board. We do have a city ordinance that prohibits the consumption on public streets, alleys, roadways, or highways. And Chief Morton alluded to this, but he needs to actually witness the individual consuming the alcohol. And I've talked with a lot of people and they said, well, they're clearly intoxicated. And that gets us to the next topic, which is public intoxication. In Kansas, you cannot be charged with public intoxication. The legislature has passed a state statute which says cities and counties cannot pass laws in regards to public intoxication. That's different in other states. I know in Virginia, sometimes the alcohol beverage control goes out to bars, finds people in the bar, and charges them with public intoxication. So Kansas has a different approach in regards to that. Now, that doesn't mean that you can be loud and disturbing the peace, or that doesn't mean you can threaten, that doesn't mean you can trespass, but public intoxication in and of itself is not a charge in Kansas. We do restrict under the Salina Code that you not be intoxicated on a highway. This is obviously a public safety concern, but that's only on highways, not on local streets. And then, as I said before, just because public intoxication in itself is not a crime, that doesn't mean that there can't be other issues. Like I said, trespassing, disturbing the peace, etc. And we'll talk about those in just a second. Loitering. Loitering is not generally in the state of Kansas considered a criminal act. It's not as clear cut where there's a statute that basically prohibits loitering statutes like there is in regards to public intoxication. Many loitering laws, if they just say no one can be here if they're not moving between these hours, have been struck down as being overbroad. So what's happened is the city of Salina doesn't have a prohibition on loitering. This is an interesting one. By persons under legal age at locations serving cereal malt beverages, and also for those lovely attorneys that are hanging out at the municipal court trying to find clients. So that's an anti-lawyer loitering ordinance that the city of Salina has in place. You'll also sometimes see anti-loitering laws in regards to solicitation for prostitution. If somebody is going out and loitering and trying to solicit for prostitution. Those are much more limited loitering laws rather than those broad laws which often get struck down for overbreadth. Another thing is dumpster diving. It's not illegal to go through people's trash if it's in the right-of-way or in a public area. There's actually Supreme Court cases on this. That does not mean, however, that they get to trespass on your land or otherwise. So that's why when it says when it's on the curb. So Sometimes there's a misperception about that. Much like I mentioned before, sometimes I've seen properties where large people have been allowed to congregate because the owners have allowed them. Well, that then clearly becomes a health issue, a health code standard or otherwise. Because when you get thousands of people in one encampment, as somebody who's seen it really up close, it gets to be a very serious health concern. For example, in Portland, next to a Lowe's that I used to go to all the time when I was rehabbing my house, when they removed all the trash from an encampment, they found 4 stolen cars underneath that. But you had to dig through all that. The animals were living in there and everything else. So it becomes, on those large scale, a very severe health problem. Disturbing the peace. You can be charged with disturbing the peace, and this ties back again to the public intoxication. You may be intoxicated in public, but that doesn't mean that you can disturb the peace. Salina defines it as it's a noise that's audible within, and I won't read it all to you, but basically you have to make a noise which can be heard over 50 feet away and disturb people. So that can still get you a charge. And Salina currently has an ordinance in regards to that. Another issue that I've heard a lot of is people coming from out of town to Salina who are homeless and coming here. And since September 22nd, we've been tracking that at the Salina PD. There have been 17 calls so far since September 22nd that were logged, but there's only been 1 since October. This is not all the people, though, that have been brought to Salina and left here. It happens with other agencies who don't call in, who don't request it. So this isn't the sole universe of the number of people that come to the city. But I can tell you, growing up in Wichita, I remember very distinctly as a relatively young man, it was a long time ago it seems now, but hearing a lot of complaints about all the people from Salina and Hutchinson that were coming to Wichita for services. And usually what happens is people who, much in those categories that Chad was alluding to, are looking for jobs, they're looking for services, they're going to get support from family members. Family members, there's more people here, so it's more likely to bring them. I can honestly tell you in every jurisdiction I've worked in, there's been concern about homeless people coming in from the outside. But there's nothing that we can really do about it, short of, we obviously aren't going to put armed guards and check everyone's ID before they come into the city. So yes, there are people that are coming to Salina that are homeless, but there's also people from Salina that are going elsewhere because of those same job prospects or family or otherwise elsewhere. Trespassing. Again, I won't bore everyone by reading this. We do have a special ordinance in place that prohibits trespass on flood control property for the city of Salina. Trespass is usually for for private property, not for public property. We also have a trespass ordinance, which this was an interesting one, I thought, for the Gypsum Hills Cemetery if they have been warned not to be on the cemetery grounds. I suspect there were some incidents around Halloween sometime, and that required an ordinance to be adopted. Much as I alluded to before, who can file a trespassing complaint? The property owner, the property manager, the tenants of commercial properties, or specially designated individuals within the property can be designated by the owner. Aggressive begging and soliciting, also known as panhandling. Blanket prohibitions on prohibiting panhandling have oftentimes been struck down. The city of Salina does have an ordinance that prohibits what it defines as aggressive panhandling. And the list here, again, I won't read it all to you. It's threatening, following people, physical contact, continuing to solicit after you've been told you don't want to contribute, verbal threats, and then blocking somebody. As somebody who lived in Kansas City for a number of years, there is a number of very famous people who earned their living from panhandling. And the city decided to pass an anti-panhandling ordinance. it had an unintended consequence because that person then won $150,000 from the city for the overbroad anti-panhandling ordinance. That, again, is an example of some of the unintended consequences that can happen in these areas of the law. So, again, the city of Salina does prohibit aggressive panhandling in this manner, but there isn't a blanket prohibition against that because it would be subject to a strong legal challenge, and we would not want to contribute as the city of Kansas City did. And that wasn't the end, but oh well. Don't know what happened there. Couple other things I want to talk about since the rest of it disappeared. The unintended consequences, again, just to give you another example, where I was at in Washington, we had a big problem with RVs, with people either purchasing or acquiring because people just wanted to get rid of them, very dilapidated RVs. And then they'd park them on the street and they'd live in them. That way they weren't having to trespass on private land. It became a huge, huge problem with more and more RVs. The difficulty was, a lot of times these would be abandoned and the RVs would be left there. So we looked to see about starting a program to getting these RVs that had been abandoned or were in violation of the anti-parking ordinance and then getting them off the streets. The recyclers of the RVs would not take them without a rather hefty monetary compensation. So we wanted to do this for the citizens, so we started down that path of getting these dilapidated RVs off the road. Suddenly, we were overwhelmed with RVs because we didn't anticipate that the recyclers would then pay people to bring their RVs to our jurisdiction to recycle them. That, again, is another example of the unintended consequences. So rather than removing the number of RVs, we increase the number of RVs at the same time. Another example is the some of the times when you're looking at some of these ordinances and stuff, they sound good on their surface. And this is my personal opinion, but when I was in Washington, the residents of the state of Oregon passed a law that decriminalized all drugs. We're not talking marijuana, that had been around for a long time out there, but we're talking methamphetamine, heroin, really strong drugs. The idea was these people couldn't pay for it, they need treatment, this will help them do this because they wouldn't be in the legal system. The unintended consequence of this is, not shocking to me, was a massive upswing in drug addiction in Portland. One of the reasons I was very glad, beautiful scenery to move away from there because it's depressing to walk over people on the sidewalk that are passed out with the needles hanging out of their arm. And I literally would almost see that every day. As somebody who's experienced, starting a drug court or something like that, in the end, the only way you're really going to be able to try to address these fundamental issues are through some of these service providers. You can't enforce your way out of homelessness. That doesn't mean that the law enforcement of the courts don't play an important role when crimes are committed, when the public order is disrupted, but you really have to look at those root causes if you really want to try to address that. I don't know of any jurisdiction that has been able to either legislate or take enforcement action to eliminate homelessness. If that worked, everybody would be doing it. What you have to really do is look at those root causes, try to address them. And again, Salina is very fortunate. That doesn't mean that we don't have issues here with homelessness. We do. But we have resources. We have a very strong community base here. And so we're much better positioned than a lot of these other jurisdictions. So I will turn it over now.
Yes, thank you. That is the educational portion of our program tonight. And but let me first ask if there are any of you on the panel that would like to respond to some of these things, just a few comments if you had them in mind. And if you don't, we'll go on to questions. All right, then. Let me, okay. I have one too many microphones here, but, or two too many. If you have questions, then raise your hand and you'll be aiming for one of these two microphones up here. Who would like to start? Okay, we have one in the back over here. Hop up to that mic there. Please state your name.
My name is,
Is he on? Just a minute. I don't think there's a switch, so they just have to give you the right lever back there. Get close to it. Get it right up close and see if it works. Okay, you
Yep.
know what? I have an extra one.
Go ahead, talk into it.
how about now? How about now? How about now? Yeah. Okay, my name is David Litchman. I am a resident of Salina, Kansas. I live on Highland Avenue, and I spend every night in downtown Salina. My issue or my question is for actually law enforcement and our city leadership. I notice that when I am downtown every night locking up the bathrooms, I am constantly removing homeless people from the bathrooms. Constantly. Most of them are drunk. Some of them are under the influence of crystal methamphetamine because I can smell it. Not so much marijuana. What I want to know is when I hear about how we are short on staff in the police department, why isn't the city commission being approached to get you more funding to pay our officers more money? I know that law enforcement is a very difficult job in the political climate of this country right now, but we definitely need to fund you. If you're having trouble hiring people, why are you having trouble hiring people? Why isn't the city commission being approached by that? Why are you still the interim police chief when you've been with us for 30 years?
That's another question.
So the thing is I see a lot of things that a lot of people in this room don't see. And it's actually becoming a health problem. It's been talked about being a health problem, that, loitering and things like that, public drunkenness, not really criminal. But I've seen a lot of bad health things in the bathrooms. Bad.
Thank you. So hiring is a problem for many entities in the United States right now. But would you like to address this question?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Well, the hiring issue over the last couple of years have been worse than I've seen in the previous 28, 29 years. With regards to the funding by the City Commission funds us every year. And I can tell you that most anything that we ask for with regards to equipment or funding is approved, it's considered, but it's approved. We just recently, the city went through a pay study, and that was implemented the first part of September. So that takes a little bit of time for that to filter out into the state and other jurisdictions. We're towards the top as far as police officer pay in the state, from what I know. That process of hiring usually takes about up to 54 days, and then after we get them hired, then we have another minimum of 8 months to get them trained before they're actually deployable. It's interesting that your comment was with regards to the downtown restrooms, and in speaking with Lieutenant Miller just this evening, he had mentioned that we had a complaint just recently with regards to some people that were I think behind Old Chicago, and were under a blanket in front of the restrooms, and we were called about it and went over and dealt with it. Certainly something I think that needs to be considered. If they're there every night in the restrooms, then we need to find a better way for us to check into that. And I'm not exactly sure at this point how we would do that from a police perspective, but it's something that we certainly need to keep an eye on, and I appreciate you bringing it to our attention.
I wonder if any of the rest of you have any thoughts on this downtown restrooms, anything like that? Next question. Yes, you can go on, use that microphone over there.
Ben Pruitt, Salina, Kansas. I'm curious as to where is the representative from the Salina Fire Department. I'm also curious on what the percentage of fires are downtown here that are as a direct result of the homeless. And what is the number of non-emergent calls the Salina Fire Department gets that are a direct result of the homeless? Also, I'd like to thank the commission. I'd like to thank Mr. Mayor Davis for bringing this. This is pretty nice. This is overdue. So thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any read on fires downtown, Chief?
Fires aren't my expertise, but none are coming to my mind of something recently. I think that's something that we could probably get back with you on, or the fire chief could, but nothing is coming to my mind right offhand. Sorry, I can't be more specific for you.
Another question? Yes, Lene. Go. We need you up at that mic. We hope it works. Nope. Can't. Let's try it. Can we get that one to work? Keep trying. Yeah, it is on. So if you just put your mouth right up against the phone.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I am talking. Oh, maybe I wasn't. Okay, just a couple questions. First of all, thank all of you for doing this, and I'm amazed. I did not expect this crowd. It's wonderful. I just was noticing, it talks about, particularly with Salina Rescue, the Christian-based recovery program. My question is, as you're working with homeless, with any of these programs, if they're truly, truly motivated and doing what you're asking them to do in terms of obeying the rules and such, but yet they have a different belief in terms of their personal religious or spiritual belief, are they still allowed to be in the program, or are they booted out? That's one question. And then I just wanted to ask, I see Rescue Missions has a mentoring program. Does the Ashby House have a mentoring program?
Thank you. Some of that we've heard, but go ahead. Chad, you want to start?
Sure. Our New Life program is a Christian-based program, so it would make sense that, yeah, we expect people entering into that program to be Christian. It does not mean they cannot receive services of the mission. They can certainly join our New Life program or medical mental health program. We've also been expanding cooperative services with CKF Addiction Treatment Center. There's now a AA meeting that meets at the rescue mission every week. CKF Addiction Treatment Center sends a peer navigator out to the mission. They make that peer navigator available to anybody at the mission who would like to discuss services with them. We also provide opportunities in cooperation with CKF to do Zoom meetings from the mission into different meetings and classes that they provide. So there are many opportunities for them at CKF, and no, we don't kick them out if they're a Buddhist or anything like that. that's not who we are. We do stand for what we believe, but we love all, and we try to help as many as we can.
Yeah. And speaking for Ashby House, we do have case management through CKF and through Central Kansas Mental Health as well. And so, and then in our financial literacy classes, we actually reach out and have mentors with our clients as well as they work through trying to save money. And then our directors also help mentor in the fact that they set them up and will show them all the resources that are out there that are available to them. So I feel like all of those are kind of a mentoring, background, so.
Is there any mentoring in the whole area of just learning to know and love themselves and the emotional impact? Does that include it?
This gentleman right here is Patrick Parker, and we on Wednesday mornings he does affirmations and with our patients and family matters as well, and where we talk about those kind of things. So we do a lot of different things. My house manager, she's actually a retired, she used to be a chef, so we actually do cooking classes. She does classes with them on gardening, and so we try to provide a really holistic approach to helping our clients and our patients.
Thank you. Another question? You have one there?
Dalton, Salina. Couple questions. Chief Morton, would you happen to have any information on your PD officers, the sheriff's department, or the troopers that self-dispatch to an incident that they see unfold downtown? Second question, there has been several instances with some of the homeless individuals that I can recount. I've had contracts downtown. I've had to deal with some of them. You've got them threatening you, you call dispatch. Dispatch is normally, we'll get somebody when we can. At what point are they going to escalate it where they actually send somebody quicker than 20 or 30 minutes? Because there's been some people downtown that have been threatened by the homeless that I've been told that dispatch is like, we'll get somebody when they're available. That could go on that could be a whole shift before you have somebody available. Very rarely, but it could happen. Second question is, you've got, just the other day, I was approached at an intersection of 5th and Iron at the stoplight by a homeless individual. Up and coming into my window, I was driving, and your PD officers were right there. My question is, what more do you guys need downtown to assist with what you have going on that maybe the commission could assist with? I know the sheriff's office is trying to help, but they're also short-staffed just like you are. Last I knew, you were 30 some short, but that's been 2 months ago, so I don't know how much you've hired since then. But there is people downtown, the older population, there's several business owners downtown that are concerned sometimes to leave their businesses after dark because of issues with the homeless population.
Sure, and our response time is relative to what's reported to the dispatchers when the call is made. Certainly, if somebody is reporting a crime in progress, and if it involves a weapon or a threat of violence, they're going to pull people off of non-priority calls and get them on the way to the situation. So if it's described to them as something in progress, then in most cases, that's going to be the response. If it's described as being, something that happened some time ago or that the suspect's no longer there, then in those cases, it may, it's not going to be necessarily a priority and is certainly going to, we're not going to pull people off of other calls, priority calls for that. With regards to the staffing, we've never been 30 down as far as the numbers that officers. We're currently have an approved sworn staffing of 84. We're down 15 people as of today, so we have 69 that are, we have 69 officers at this point. 10 of those are currently in the process of going through training. That's what our staffing situation looks like. I can tell you that in working with the Highway Patrol and the Sheriff's Office both, that we, in my 30-some years being here, we all cooperate, and if there's certainly something that's very emergent, that if there are state troopers that are in the area, they will respond. If there's Sheriff's Department that is close to town, they will respond, and vice versa. You know, with situations that are out in the county and maybe close to town, we'll certainly back the Sheriff's Department as well.
I did have another question. With the mental health crisis, a lot of your homeless is involved with mental health. I know the state's had issues with both their facilities. The one that's been in the news more is Larned State Mental Hospital, and then they have Osawatomie. Are they working with either the law enforcement side of it? I don't know if CKF or not, if Central Kansas Mental Health's involved with any of that. And then what can you guys do if there's a homeless issue that requires mental health by like forcing them into a care facility, whether it's Salina Regional's mental health facility, Larned State Mental Health, or Osawatomie? And what is the, do you guys work well? I know KDADS is over all that.
Yeah. Can you talk about that, Cody?
Yes. I don't know if my. Okay, so his basic question was, can you send people to the state hospital if they have mental health issues? And then generally, you have to meet certain criteria according to the state statute. And they clearly state in the statute, you can't send them by the sole basis of that they're poor, basically. They have to be an imminent danger to themselves or others. And there's some open interpretation to what that actually means. And the state hospital, in addition, is an acute facility. It's not you can't send somebody there and they're going to stay for a long time. It's about a 14-day stay at the max. So it's not really a long-term solution in that case, because they have to meet all those criteria. And those aren't criteria we came up with. Those are state statutes. And they have to be an imminent danger, and it can't be because they're poor. They have to have a diagnosable mental illness, et cetera, et cetera. And then they usually get discharged on the average about 7 or 8 days and come back. And then when they do that, they usually are discharged to our facility, and then we try and arrange housing, et cetera. But it's not illegal to be homeless, and so some of them just get up and walk out. So did that answer your question? Yeah, both state hospitals have struggled with the same staffing issues, et cetera. And most recently, probably in the last 12 months, there's been, sometimes there's a waiting list. So if someone locally is getting what's called involuntarily committed, meaning we're going through the court to do a civil commitment on them, sometimes they have, and there's not an opening at Larned or Osawatomie, then they'll set in the emergency room until there is an opening. And that can be sometimes extensive.
Another question down here. Oh, two of them. Okay, I was going to go over there, but there are no hands up. So try that microphone and stand up close to it. Oh, yeah. Go.
Hello, my name is Sarah Shaw. I think I'm very proud to live in Salina and be part of the community. I have worked downtown, including during night shifts, taking out the trash in the alleyways and stuff. So I have seen the homelessness problem in Salina. I'm very familiar with it. I guess, what would some of you say to reemphasize some of what we saw in the legal framework presentation, that homelessness is not purely solvable through police enforcement, and it's not illegal to be homeless. It's not illegal for them to be on the streets. It's not illegal for them to approach you, as long as they're not being aggressive or speak to you or be in your way. It's not illegal. What would any of you say to that?
Our goal is to build relationships with our homeless neighbors. They're people. Treat them like people. As you start treating them like people, you will be amazed at the respect they start showing you in response. But if you treat them as if they're less than human, most likely you're going to get a less than human response. We need to start building trust with our homeless neighbors, and as we start building a relationship and building trust, oftentimes that's the catalyst that helps us to start opening doors to get them the greater help that they need. And we've seen that here as we've been working with some of our most chronically homeless people in our community here at the Community Resource Center this past year. You ought to visit with Chris Smole, who's standing back there in the background, who does amazing work here, and hear about some of the men that she has, and ladies, that she has made tremendous inroads with, people that have been homeless in our community for years are now finally starting to come around and getting the help. But it's because she took the time to show that she cares about them, and she built relationships, and she built trust with them. And that's how we get change to start happening on that level. You can't force somebody to do what you want them to do. And so if you just come and tell somebody, hey, do this or do that, that rarely works. But when you start building your trust with them, that's usually when we can start getting some momentum.
Claudette, I saw you nodding a lot. Do you have any stories to go along with that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I completely agree. I think that, over my career in social services, I don't think there's been any avenue that I've worked in where change was going to come about without first there being that rapport and relationship and trust. Our homeless neighbors they don't trust us because of the way they've been treated. The fact is that often they are ridiculed and demeaned and demoralized. And I am not at all going to sit here and pretend that there are not issues and that perhaps there hasn't been a homeless person that someone has run into that has been negative or used abusive language or did anything violent. I will never say that. But I also would suspect that probably in this room, there's someone who has verbally abused someone or has been in a physical altercation with someone else or has, been, big and bad and tried to scare another human being. So I would say that that's just the nature of humans, is that we're not all good, but we're not all bad. And it's the same thing for our homeless brothers and sisters. And so I think that it's very true. If you treat someone as if they are an animal, then someone's going to act like they are an animal. There you go.
Thank you. Yes. That one works. This one works. I'm not sure about that one, so. I'd rather have you wait at this point, yes.
Can you hear me? I'm short. I'm Beverly Cole, and I have a very basic question. How do people get into your programs? Are they referred? Do they come to you? Do you go out and talk to folks and say, we know you're struggling, this is available for you? How do they get into your programs?
Yeah, there's multiple ways that they get into our programs. We do have a street outreach program. We go out and look for folks and help them that way. We get referrals from law enforcement or other Salina Grace, et cetera, the Mission, Ashby House. If they have folks that are needing mental health help, they usually give us a call and we connect that way. So that's generally how we connect with them.
Is this on? I'll try not to louden it again. We have our Pathfinder Recovery Center, which is open 5 days a week. It's a free service staffed by certified peer mentors. Those peer mentors who are also staffing services at partner agencies. Individuals can self-refer to us. Our detoxification service is a walk-up to whomever is in need. If we have a bed opening, residential care, outpatient care, et cetera, could be a self-referral or referral by another agency.
It's kind of the same with our programming at Catholic Charities. People can walk in because with our housing program, a person has to be under legal supervision, so probation, corrections, or parole. A lot of times those individuals will come through to us through their supervising officers, through drug court, or some other means. But yes, we get them a variety of different ways as well.
At the Salina Rescue Mission, we get a lot of referrals from local agencies as well as the police department, hospital, and so forth. And sometimes people just come in off the streets, and all of that's fine. With the Community Resource Center here, one of our goals was to reduce the barriers to finding services that a person needs. And so our big goal here at the Community Resource Center is to be a clearinghouse for all the agencies in town. Our goal is not to do their work. Our goal is to build relationships and then make sure the person doesn't get lost in transition. So instead of just giving someone a name and a number on a piece of paper and say, here, go call them, they can help you, our care managers are sitting there making the phone calls with the individual and making sure that they don't fall through the cracks, so to speak, and that they get the help they need. And once again, oftentimes those that we work with in the community, they need help from multiple agencies. And so helping to coordinate the care and the services there is a major thing, especially for those who are in high crisis situations and get overwhelmed easy. Someone to walk alongside them and make sure that they get to all their appointments and make sure that they're not falling through the cracks.
At Ashby House, most of our Bridge House program referrals come through CKF. We get phone calls. We also have an online platform on our website where people can apply through that platform as well. So,
I'm also curious, just a curiosity, the folks that we see sitting like at the driveway in Walmart or the driveway in Dillon's with their signs, are those local people? Are they people from out of town? Is it not helpful to give them food or water or money? Is that not recommended?
So I can only speak of my opinion. First of all, the people that you see panhandling in the community are not staying at the rescue mission.
That's what I thought.
You can either work our programs or not work our programs. But holding a sign out in the community is not one of our programs. So if we do see somebody in the community from the rescue mission out panhandling, and from time to time we do, we address it quickly. And they have to make a choice. And I've had people say, I'd rather panhandle because it's lucrative. They get the money they are looking for because, Chad, don't get yourself in trouble. Panhandling, in my opinion, is emotional blackmail. Because we see someone out there asking for money and our heart goes out to them and we're good people and we want to help. But what they do with that money is not what you want them to do with that money. And it's only a temporary Band-Aid you're giving them. It's not the real change they need. So please support your local agencies, not panhandlers.
Thank you.
I would just like to add on, I agree, I often tell people, I would never suggest that you give money, right? Because if someone is really in need and I mean, I will be honest, I help when I see people, but usually I'll like buy them a meal or something like that, to try to help.
Water.
Or if they have a specific need, if they have, children and maybe someone needs diapers or clothes, then obviously we have a thrift store and we have a diaper program and there's other ways that we can help. So I normally tell people you can help with commodities, but I would not help monetarily.
Great, thank you.
Okay, with your hair on top of your head, you've been waiting a long time.
I'm Valerie Hicks. I am a lifelong Salina citizen. I guess what I want to ask today is, so recently on the Salina Post, there was talk about the housing, and the market for the housing was like $175,000 to like $230,000 range, just South Ohio. I guess my question would be, what are we doing for our, I like to say, unhoused neighbors? I don't like the term homeless. So our unhoused neighbors, or like affordable housing. Because I wouldn't, I don't know, I guess I should say too, I'm a person in recovery. And so just rebuilding life, getting back, rebuilding my credit and doing all those things, like I wouldn't have that opportunity to get into that low income housing or that type of housing. So like, what are we doing looking at a lower income housing? And also on that note, most of us people who are in recovery or early in recovery from addiction, mental health, those kind of things, we struggle with felony charges. We also struggle with, of course, our addiction issues, credit issues as well. And so when, like right now, if I wasn't in the position that I'm in, early recovery, I wouldn't be able to go and rent a home because of previous felony charges or because of my credit score. So I'm just curious as to, is there anything that the city of Salina is currently doing to work toward better, more affordable housing for lower income people?
I can help answer that.
Was I supposed to be addressing them or you guys?
I was just in a meeting with the Salina Housing Authority
Okay.
Tuesday, and there's an organization here in Salina, it's called CHODO. If someone wants to help me out with what that stands for, Community Housing. Yeah. And they are getting ready to close on, the Housing Authority is transitioning, and the CHODO is buying these HUD housing units and remodeling them to make them affordable housing.
Okay, I work in this field, and so I'm like, and when I work with colleagues and people, and I ask those kind of questions, just because I'm like, what is the hope out there for our future for that? So.
And there is in the works for an apartment type complex going in on West Cloud It'll probably start sometime next year.
That's exciting. Thank you.
Oh, sure.
My name's Mike Peterson. I'm the Executive Director for Community Housing Development Corporation of Central Kansas, fondly known as CHODO. So what we've done recently, as the commissioner said, we purchased 44 units from the Housing Authority, and we only have 2 that are available. We've filled them. So you're right. There's a definite need for low and moderate income housing in Salina. The other thing I would share with you we're doing right now is we have a weatherization program which was funded by Saline County ARPA funds, and we've just gotten that off the ground. There is a way to apply for assistance if you're low and moderate income for us to be able to help you weatherize the home. And we'd love to hear from you. And all of this is available. Our Facebook page is probably the best place to go in order to get to that. We have been renovating houses. The organization's actually been quietly in existence since 2005. Probably the last 5 years. The previous executive director, Gary Hobby, couldn't be here this evening. He was going to come with me. They have renovated and resold 8 homes in the last 5 years or so to people of low and moderate income. So all of those things have been things that this organization has done. We're a nonprofit. I can't take much credit for any of this. I've only been there since July 22nd of this year, but the predecessors to me did a wonderful job.
Thank you. Thank you for filling us in there. I'm going to call on John. Yeah, probably better.
Thank you, and thank you to the panel for all the work you do here. I've got a couple of questions, but I want to start out with saying that in the late 80s and early 90s, I lived in New York City. I was in my mid-20s. And at that time, New York City was experiencing an AIDS epidemic, a homeless epidemic, and a crack cocaine epidemic. So my question kind of goes to you. And at that time, I went to high school in Salina and went to a church that really encouraged service to your community. So I worked at homeless shelters and AIDS relief places and worked with many people that had AIDS. My question to you on that front is, we have a homeless problem. It's not an epidemic. We have a drug problem. It's not an epidemic. Fentanyl is, things get here a little later than they do in most places. Fentanyl is coming. I've heard it's hitting Wichita now. So it's coming. What are we doing to be proactive? What are we doing to be proactive to get out in front of some of that before it gets here? And then just to piggyback on a couple of other things that were said before, and from you, what would you tell the policymakers sitting here that they need to do to get out in front of this? The lady here just spoke about affordable housing. We have neighborhoods, core neighborhoods in the city of Salina that are deteriorating. We have North Salina that has had nothing addressed in it for over 60 years. These are high poverty neighborhoods, and those are the people at risk that you spoke of. What are the policies that they can do to address those things? And I will just, on my last personal comment, I walked here, it took me about 4 minutes. I live downtown. I live in a core neighborhood. I walk my dog up and down Santa Fe every day. It's a 35-minute walk. I met a new friend this summer who's homeless. His name's Kevin. I've encouraged him to come in here when it's cold. It's easy to approach these people with my dog because they love the dog. And Kevin has said to me, I wish I had a dog. I used to have one. So in a way, it's a normalizing thing for him. And so thank you all for what you do, and I'd like to maybe at some point hear what they maybe can do to help some of these things.
Yeah.
So the question about fentanyl, and I'll speak to opioid use disorder, opiates, and the kinds of funding that's been available for, has it been the last 6 years or so? So the state targeted response grant coming down from the federal level brought dollars to Kansas to treat patients with opioid use disorder and to provide medication-assisted treatment, both agonist and antagonist medicine therapies to go along with treatment components to help people find sobriety and manage their recovery. That's most recently turned into the state opioid response grant. So the STR, the SOR, same thing. With that grant funding here in Salina, we've been able to build a medication-assisted treatment clinic. We currently have 175 patients coming to our location here in Salina to get medication-assisted treatment, primarily patients on Suboxone to treat opioid use disorder, but also patients who have alcohol use disorder who take some other medications we have available. Some really good things about that funding is that as it came in and there were awarded agencies, CKF being one of them, and over time it's just turned into being available through our state block grant. So other agencies who receive block grant funding for individuals 200% or below federal poverty guidelines and without insurance to get free care. This funding started to sit right next to it, which is really good. And treatment was paid for, medication paid for, physician visits to get the medication. That's been great. We've built partnerships with pharmacies to get medication to individuals who would have never had this medication before that can save lives, et cetera. Narcan was available initially, and we got it out to community partners and trained them on usage of Narcan. That shifted over time for another agency in Kansas to manage Narcan distribution, which we helped agencies then link to that agency. Then there became a Narcan funding and Narcan shortage, so Narcan hasn't been available as often as it needs to be. We've purchased Narcan ourselves, $5,000 worth of Narcan recently to give to patients coming in and out of our treatment location because it's very important to have that life-saving medication available. We give it away in 2 doses because sometimes it takes 2 doses. I would say this funding's been very good, but it's not guaranteed it will last forever. We've seen that on the treatment side, that there's less dollars now this go around for a next 2-year period than there was previously. We can treat with medication, but treatment, those other components, residential outpatient treatment to go with the medication, wasn't funded for 3 months. And now they're going to turn on the funding again for 6 months, and then we don't know if it's going to go off again. So it's this odd thing for the next 2-year period. I would say at a very high level, things that can help people who have opioid use disorder, which is very underestimated in the data that's out there. When I said 10% of people with addiction are showing up in treatment services, and you look at data across the state for what substances are people using, we pull data from those attending treatment services. So if I say amphetamine use disorder, or I say alcohol use disorder, or cannabis use disorder, or opioid use disorder, which is growing there, we're talking about the 10% showing up in treatment settings. That can be influenced by law enforcement and arrests and people in the criminal justice system as well. So what about all those people out there, that 90% who aren't showing up in treatment? There's a lot more opioid use disorder occurring than any of us even know about. So you start to see signs of that in Salina, and you see overdoses, and you see deaths, and you see people coming into a clinic that now has almost 200 patients getting medication from in and around Salina, and that's significant. What we need are fentanyl testing strips legalized in Kansas. We haven't allowed our medical professionals to know what's going on with someone's system and help them before they're really in bad shape and in trouble and almost dying, because we haven't been able to use those in Kansas to know what's in their system. And I know there's going to be some movement during the legislative session talking about that. We need to get rid of caseloads for patients who are attending treatment for medication-assisted treatment. So our physician has a maximum of 275 patients she can see who have an opioid use disorder who need an agonist medication such as buprenorphine, which means it delivers a little bit of an opiate to the brain receptor site to help stabilize the individual as they manage their condition. They don't meet diagnostic criteria for addiction at that point. They're on a medication that's helping them move forward in their recovery. So those caseload limits for these very good medications that also have a substance in it that helps against overdose risk versus opioids and what we saw with the pharmaceutical companies and the prescriptions that were out there, and some things that can still be prescribed as far as pain medications that don't have limits for prescribers. That's a real barrier for us to grow our clinic and reach more patients. So those 2 things are really big issues. Yeah, so.
Thank you. I would like to have one more question. Janice, do you still have a question? You've been waiting a long time, haven't you? Okay, I'll let 2 more questions happen, and then I want to let the Uh, Yeah. Oh, okay, because we do have them on our agenda to have some comments. So, but you've been waiting a long time and, okay, go ahead.
So, so I came upon a book online by Greg Colburn called "Homelessness is a Housing Problem," and it basically discusses how the primary problems are are the supply of affordable housing and also being able to connect people with those opportunities. So, and to his point, I lived in a hotel for about 3 months last year, and it is scary. So my question is, I've heard that there's a community development bank. So part one of that question is, why hasn't that been more active in developing like single occupancy room housing and starter homes that people can afford? And how can we connect people to the stuff that exists for them already that they haven't found yet? Because when we were looking, uh, we just got lucky and we found we knew somebody who knew our landlord. A lot of the places that are available don't advertise online, and you basically have to find the signs around town. So, yeah, how do we connect people with what's available?
Is that something that Ashby House does? You guys are always trying to put people in housing.
Yeah, I mean, when he was talking, I knew exactly who he was back there. So we've already connected with him, and both of my directors discuss with him housing all the time. So with Chodo, so yes.
And anybody else want to say? Yes, Chet?
At the rescue mission, we have a number of landlords who contact us and let us know about homes they have for rent. And so we try to share that information with our shelter guests as well. So that's another thing that we do to try to help inform people of what some housing opportunities are in town.
Okay, I think we need to turn it over to well, Janice, do you want to ask one more thing, or do you want to go to the, to the city commission? I did say you could, and so I'll let you.
Janice Norland, Salina. We've heard a lot tonight about the individual and the individual responsibility. And I think it's really important, while we have our public officials here, to talk about public policy. And three things that popped up on this screen immediately for me were poverty, which means living wages, affordable housing, which means Section 8, and that nobody's rent should be over 30% of what their income is. And the third thing is Medicaid expansion. And we do have a legislator in the audience tonight. Kansas legislature is starting up again in January. We can pass Medicaid expansion. Think about this. If we had a place to live, knew we could get medical care, and had a job, maybe we wouldn't have as much mental illness and depression and addiction. So I think that it is time. It's fine, and I appreciate the work you do with individuals, but we have to look at the public policy component of this. I don't know what the average rent is in Salina right now, but I've heard it's very high. And I can bet you, so I appreciate her comments about the housing. I appreciate John's comments, but we have to look at the public policy part of that. And I implore all of you to do that.
The average rent is $790.
Okay, $709. It should never be over 30% of what somebody's income is. If you're doing a budget, everybody should know that. It means some people are nodding their heads, so I'm not pulling this out of my hat here. So I want to know about the affordable housing, Section 8, all of that.
And I will venture to say that we have structured our society so that we have poor people. And that's sort of a radical thing to say, but it results in a lot of problems. But we really need to let us hear from the city commissioners, since they're the ones that called this meeting, and we only have 5 or 7 minutes left, 5. So Here we go.
You got 60 seconds ready.
Mayor Davis says I have 60 seconds, so this will be quick. As you can tell from the conversation tonight, homelessness is a complex subject. I guess from what I've heard today, one of the things as a commissioner that I think is one of our main goals is public safety. So I think we need to work with our agencies over here. Not all homeless individuals are the same, as none of us are the same. I have an office, it's a block from here, so I see a considerable amount of the individuals that come into this facility. There are some that would scare an individual if you meet them on the street, and then there's a lot of them that are harmless. So we need to somehow figure a way to protect the public from some of those individuals. You find it hard to believe, but not everybody in our community, as commissioners we hear, believe that we need to continue to support these organizations. We have some people that will come to us and tell us we need to put them on a bus and get them out of town. So that's the kind that we deal with, that type of mentality as a commission all the time. Dealing with the safety, and I know there's discussion been made about the police. I think our police department does an excellent job. I see them downtown quite a bit where our homeless is. We went about and created and built a training facility. We're doing everything we can as a commission to help bring more police officers to our community. We did a pay study. We've increased the salaries. As I told somebody, the way people look at police officers is not like it was when I was growing up. When I grew up, you wanted to be one of three things: a professional baseball player, a firefighter, or a police officer. And I believe two of those today to still be true.
Well, those were the boys, you know.
That's the boys. Sorry. But anyway, so we need to continue to support our police. We need to continue to work with the agencies here to do what we can to, we don't want to get like Portland. That's what I say.
I think that. See, I think you got a microphone there, right? Yeah.
I'd like to expand on that comment regarding the police department. I think it's worth mentioning that we recently voted in a mental health co-responder program. And I think this is going to be a great step in decriminalizing addiction, poverty, and should hopefully provide a more direct link to some of the services here. And actually, I'd love to have your opinion on that program, because I think it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Absolutely, that's been something I know we have talked about in our community for quite a few years now. So we're really excited that that's finally coming to fruition, and we think it's going to be a great kind of partner with what it is that we do, so that more people are getting the help as the police officers come in contact with individuals. So thank you for doing that.
In case no one knows, Greg is a great asset to the commission. Greg is a former police officer. I don't know how many people know that, but he served as a police officer in Salina.
Well, all we have to do is solve every problem that every community in this country has. And some people don't want us to do that, because the more problems we solve, the more we'll attract. Well, you either have a choice to live in a community that's so great that other people want to come, or you live in a crap hole that nobody wants to come. And then you're stuck in that place. We got to make a spiritual decision. You can't worry about who's going to come here. Our kids leave here, go to New York City to what? Become an actor. What do they become? Struggling people in New York City who can barely pay their rent and buy food. So people are going to move. Most of the homeless played with us on the playgrounds when we were kids. They started out just like us, and life happened to them. And to build, one of my daughters, none of you all know here because she didn't grow up with Pam and me here, but she came here from Wisconsin, went to Ashby House, turned her life around. I've seen what Ashby House can do. All the programs that were mentioned, they're real. She's gainfully employed, raising her 3 kids, are doing well. But it takes a lot of money. And we can divert city money towards that if that's what the populace wants us to do. Right now, Salina is blessed with a lot of free will giving to agencies like this. But it takes a lot of resources to rebuild a life. You can't legislate that. I mean, it takes a lot of people to do that. I think Medicaid expansion is obviously beyond our purview right here in Salina. But if people are healthy, they can keep their jobs, they don't go into medical bankruptcy, they can get to work because they've been to the doctor, they can get medicines. So talk to your state legislators. The one thing I'm concerned about, and it's probably the elephant in the living room here, but I'm very concerned about the possibility that the Community Resource Center might not be housed downtown. I don't think if you move it, the homeless are going to move their haunts to wherever it is. Why do people ask for money downtown? Well, they're visitors. What do visitors have? Cash. Restaurants have food. Downtown has people on the street. So if I was hungry, where would I go? Where people are. The bathrooms are a mess because they have to go to the bathroom just like us. So it sounds like simple things to fix, but it's not. I would just challenge any one of us to leave here tonight. Don't go home, don't get in your car, and don't spend any money for the next 72 hours. I'm sure your attitude towards people around you and life will change. All I'm saying is I don't have an all-encompassing answer, but if the city decides it wants to work towards one, we've got the resources here in town to do something really fantastic.
Well, I would say thank you to our moderator, Ms. Zimmerman, and to the panel, and thank you all very much for what you've given us. If I had a couple of questions for the panel, I guess I'd ask what kind of resources or engagements are lacking and what do we need? And how can we better help you to do that? As policymakers here, our hands are somewhat tied. We can tax the heck out of you if you want, and we can do anything you want us to do. But I don't think the public's going to stand for that. So as policymakers, we have to address things incrementally, and there's a lot of businesses that we're just not in. So I give recognition to the resources we have. They're fabulous for a town of our size, and I appreciate the people that head those organizations. And when Salina Grace came to us about the Community Resource Center, that was a really exciting proposition because that was some coordination there that I hadn't recognized before. And if we can give any more assistance to those kinds of services, I think that would be valuable. Affordable housing is at the key of all of this, and I think as a commission, we're attempting to address that at every level. I mean, we realize there's a gap in housing at every level, and if you can alleviate some of that gap at some level, it helps take some of the pressure off at another level. There's a marketplace out there. We are not in the housing business directly. We are fortunate to be in a position to incentivize some of those things, but we are still reliant on the private sector coming to us with ideas and responding to those. So rest assured, we're doing everything we can, and I believe that we're making incremental we're pushing the envelope on all sides, all that we can, and we recognize that housing is a key to all of these problems.
Homeless situation, it's not new. It's just become more prevalent and in your face, I guess. And as Mr. Hennessy gave the examples on the West Coast, that it's been accepted as this is how society lives today. And I keep hearing over and over from people that, well, Salina doesn't have to be that town. And we are very blessed to have a lot of generous people here in Salina that make these agencies happen. And I can't imagine where we would be without them. It comes down to these folks, they're people, they're souls, they're lost. And much of it is a spiritual situation. They have no faith, they have no hope, but there is always hope. Bill Wilson, the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, was deemed hopeless. And look what transpired when he finally got the help he needed. I came down the same path Chad did, and so I do see the situations of drug and alcohol, and much of the problems with homelessness stems directly from the drug and alcoholism, and it has become an accepted part of society. The sale of alcohol has just, well, I still haven't got used to liquor stores being open on Sunday. It's just everywhere. And I think until that problem is addressed, people will never get their footing. They will never get traction and find a way to a better life. I've been in contact with an officer in Wichita who is part of the homeless outreach program down there, and he gave me some statistics that they compiled that the average homeless person cost a city $54,000 per year in used resources from police, fire, EMS, the jail, and hospitals. That's an outstanding number, and if someone gets housed, they consider that a savings of around $40,000. And I hear from several people, well, just lock them up. And I don't know what our average inmate fee here at the county jail is, but it's probably up there around $40,000 or $50,000. So that's not an answer. And that's not gonna get anyone on their feet, and it's not gonna solve a problem. So it's something I feel the community needs to get everyone moving in the same direction. And I know we got the problem downtown, and that is it's just the way it is in downtowns. As the mayor said, that they go where people are and there's somewhat shelter. And so it's something we have to navigate through, and I think business owners downtown need to maybe talk to one another and work out solutions and work with the police department. And I think this mental health assistance officer is going to be an asset. That I didn't realize we had such mental health problems. But the more I learn about this, that it's a problem. But I thank everyone for being here and all that came. It's a great turnout. It's a good start.
Thank you so much. I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank you especially on the panel and the city commissioners. I want to thank all in the audience. It was a great turnout. And thank you for being an easy crowd to moderate. Thanks to those who had questions. I'm sorry for those who had more questions, but we didn't have time. I want you to keep looking for answers. Keep treating each other like you're the people you meet are just as human as you are. And keep talking to your public officials and to your service providers. Thank you so much.
And
yes.
If you had comments that you didn't get a chance to express, feel free to send them to us through the city.
Send them to the city
manager.
commissioners. They want to hear them. Thank you.
You too. Take care. Yeah, you too.